Well, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand attacked Biden for an op-ed he wrote in 1981 about women's issues. She spoke with Ed and Caitlin about that decision.
Why did you decide to go after Joe Biden on this issue? You kind of previewed it last week when you were campaigning, but why now?
I think it's really important with President Trump in the White House, a clear misogynist who degrades and devalues women all the time, that we have a nominee who has a real sense of clarity on these issues. The language she used in that op-ed was really disturbing to me to read as a mother. I've worked outside the home my whole life, but for good, affordable daycare, I couldn't do my job. My second son I had as a member of Congress. And the words he used was, women working outside the home created the deterioration of family, end quote. Quote, that they were avoiding responsibilities, end quote. So I wanted to ask him very directly, what did you mean when you said that? And do you still believe that? Because we need to know that America's women have a champion as the Democratic nominee who are going to fight for things like national paid leave, affordable daycare, universal pre-K. That makes all the difference to the world for a working family.
But the former vice president came back and said, well, you know, we have known each other for a long time and you've never raised this issue before until you were running for president. Why?
I didn't know he said those words before, and they're shocking to me. I mean, that's why I really wanted him to explain what he meant and whether he still believed it, because it's contrary to how I was raised. My grandmother worked outside the home. My mother worked outside the home. And so I've only known women who have provided for their kids because they have to, but also provided for their kids because they want to make an impact and help people in their community.
Ed O'Keefe joins me now live from Detroit. Good morning, Ed. You know, the headlines last night are really focusing on Joe Biden. Talk to us about your assessment of his performance. I know yesterday you talked about this being the Detroit do-over. How do you think he fared yesterday?
It was.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Well, look, we all anticipated there would be some kind of tussle between Biden and Senator Kamala Harris, and there was. The only difference was this time he started it, raising questions about her new health care plan and sort of putting her back on her heels as she tried to explain why it would take 10 years and how much exactly it cost. She also faced questions about her prosecutorial record from when she was California Attorney General, something that she gets asked about and frankly is a big topic of conversation among younger voters on social media especially, and there too she had to defend her record. But it was Biden who continued to get the incoming from across the stage. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio repeatedly asking why he was okay with the Obama administration deporting hundreds of thousands of people. Cory Booker and him tussling over the legacy of the crime bills, anti-crime bills that were passed in the 1980s and 1990s with Biden's assistance as a senator. Stronger defense of his record than last time, but still some signs that he struggles to stay on his toes and deliver quick assessments and defenses of his own record. So we'll see exactly what happens. But, you know, you talk to Biden campaign officials, you talk to others who work for the other campaigns, and they all concede these debates ultimately do very little in the long run to move the needle or help the momentum of anyone over the course of the campaign. We'll see in the coming days, especially as we go into a long month of August, whether or not this one shifts the standings, if you will.
Yeah, understood.
In any real big way.
Absolutely. You know, Senator Kamala Harris's confrontation with Biden sort of defined that first debate, causing Biden to say this time around he would not be so polite. Harris was recently has unveiled a new health care plan and this time challenged the former vice president on that topic. Let's take a listen.
We will ensure that everyone has access to health care. Your plan, by contrast, leaves out almost 10 million Americans. So I think that you should really think about what you're saying, but be reflective and understand that the people of America want access to health care and do not want cost to be their barrier to getting it.
Senator Harris, thank you. Vice President Biden, your response?
The plan, no matter how you cut it, costs $3 trillion when it is in fact employed. Number one, 10 years from now, after 2 terms of the senator being president, after her time. Secondly, it will require middle-class taxes to go up, not down. Thirdly, it will eliminate employer-based insurance. And fourthly, what happens in the meantime?
Well, as you saw there, Harris saw the second most amount of speaking time in this debate. What was the response to her health care plan, and what challenges does she face? I mean, they spent so much time talking about health care. There were so many ideas thrown out there, but put this in perspective for us, Ed.
Well, for one thing, voters want them to be talking about health care. If you look at the recent CBS News Battleground Tracker survey, you look at other polls that have been taken in recent weeks, health care by far the most interesting topic to Democratic primary voters who want to hear specifically how they would drive down the cost of your health care. Problem is they keep arguing over the mode of delivery. Do you do an expansion of the Affordable Care Act? Do you switch to a new system? So we haven't seen too much of the conversation focus on what it would mean to the everyday voter. Instead, they're still having these sort of arguments about things that may or may never come to pass. Harris struggles to have to talk about specific policy questions. Her opponents know that. And I think when we step back from what we saw last night, we will see that she did indeed sort of get a little flustered and then thrown off her rhythm because she had to and was confronted with specific questions about her plan, which was only unveiled Monday. The accusation is she's trying to have it both ways, have some kind of system where certain people could keep some form of private insurance or buy into a government plan. She calls it Medicare for All. Bernie Sanders would tell her, no, that's not what Medicare for All is, at least not the plan I wrote. And anyone who's a fan of the Affordable Care Act would say, why are you ripping it up? So she's trying to have it both ways and is going to continue to struggle to explain this in the coming days unless she can quickly come up with a succinct answer. And she's struggled with the health care issue since the beginning of the year. So it continues to expose her, at least in that regard. But, you know, the other signal is it would suggest, if you're a fan of Kamala Harris, that she's actually climbing in the polls and her opponents are worried about it. And that's certainly how she put it last night when she spoke with reporters afterward, that she was prepared to take the scrutiny and feels that she did all right.
And this was a big night for all of those candidates on day 1 and 2. The next Democratic debate won't be until September. Who will qualify for that, and how do they?
Well, let's start with the how. You have to have at least 130,000 donors across the country. In at least 20 states, you have to have had 400 individual donors. Those are high marks to reach for somebody who may not be as well known a name. And then, in addition to that, you have to be reaching at least 2% in 4 polls, either a statewide poll in one of those early primary states or a national survey. You think to yourself, 2%, that's not too hard. It is when there's 24 people running and your name isn't Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, or Elizabeth Warren. So at this point, 7 of the 24 candidates have qualified. About 3 others are on the verge of doing so. All of them have until the end of this long month of August to make it, and we suspect there will be at least 10 candidates who qualify and move on. What the others do remains to be seen. Just because you don't make the debate doesn't mean you have to drop out. But without being on a national stage in front of millions of people, it's harder to make your case and justify continuing on.
And for those who haven't qualified yet, Ed, it's going to be a long and hot August for those folks, literally and figuratively. Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much.
Absolutely.